Hey, I'm back. This is the 2025 Model T Ford Homecoming in Richmond, Indiana. We're going to take a look at the swap meet, the cars, and of course the museum is here too. My apologies in advance that some of my shots may look a little bit hazy. Canada is once again on fire. So we here in the Midwest are on the receiving end of smoke and ash that makes everything just sort of hazy. I'll try and brighten things up a little bit, but some of my shots might be a little hazy. Sorry about that. As I said, the Model T Ford Museum is in Richmond, Indiana. It's actually two buildings on opposite sides of the street and well worth the stop if you're ever in the area. I have covered the museum more extensively in previous homecoming videos, so I'm not really going to do a deep dive into it this time. Just kind of point out that it is here and the displays are constantly changing. Oh, wait, that's kind of neat. This one's got a little shaft that comes out of the front of the engine to run a little flat belt pulley so you can run stuff around the farm. I don't remember seeing that before. Where was I? Oh yeah, the museum. Once again, Richmond, Indiana, year-round opening. So stop in, see fashion. Stop in the museum store, buy some of their swag. I know you like Model T Ford swag. I think what we're going to do is walk around, look at some of the cars and maybe some of the special displays and wrap up with the swap meet. Here's a nice 1924 Touring. The Model T, of course, was made from 1908 up to 1927, and the car changed quite a bit over those 19 years. In fact, cars in general changed over the course of those 19 years. This one is a 1926, I think, Model T Roadster pickup. What this is a standard Roadster. The trunk has been removed and a pickup bed has been put on. You can swap those back and forth. It's only a matter of a few bolts. I'll try and find a standard Roadster later so you can see that these are really the same car. This one sports an aftermarket Ruxel rear end. This is a period-correct aftermarket rear end that is actually an underdrive to give you a little bit more hill climbing power. It won't make you go any faster. For comparison's sake, here's a standard Model T rear end. You can see that the Ruxel has a much larger differential housing, so you can spot them from a mile away. The Ruxel, of course, is a 2-speed rear end, so it connects with a linkage to a floor shifter. This car has a neat little accessory. This is a Model T cooker. What it is just a little pan that bolts down directly over the exhaust manifold, and you can use it to heat up food. You can fill it with water and make hot dogs in there. A friend of mine used to use one of these to boil hot dogs, and then he had chrome-plated grease guns full of mustard and ketchup. He bought new ones. They weren't, used grease guns. So this truck kind of makes me feel right at home. It's very similar to mine. This is, of course, a Model TT, or a ton truck. The owner said that when he bought this truck, this original aftermarket cab was all in pieces. In fact, he had used the video of my TT to help him figure out how it all went together, which is, nice to hear that I'm being useful to somebody out there. Ford began offering the TT in 1918. It used the same Model T Ford 22 horsepower power plant, but the frame and rear end were much more heavy duty. There you can see the rear end is actually a worm drive as compared to the ring and pinion on a normal Model T. Now I want to pause for just a second because I've used the term worm drive on a lot of videos, so let me just give you a quick nickel tour of what that is. Here is a standard Model T differential. You see the big ring gear, and this is the pinion gear that interacts with that. This is pretty standard in the automotive and truck world. Now let's take a look at a worm drive. I happen to have a loose gear set here, as one does. We have a similar sort of a ring gear, but we have what's called a worm gear that interacts with that. These two gears have a much greater contact area than a standard ring and pinion, so they're able to transmit a lot of force and torque. Instead of the pinion gear that comes in on the side, the worm gear comes up on top, so the whole differential housing looks different. You can spot these from a mile away. Unfortunately, they're not really good for high speeds, so you see them mostly on powerful yet very slow things like old trucks and tractors. Hey, back to cars. Here's a 1914. You can see that brass is being phased out. The headlights and side lights are black with brass trim. This is also the last year for that visible wooden dash. The following year, that would be covered over with steel body panels. I kind of like the little cover that he's got over the back seat for this one to, maybe cut down on turbulence when you're driving down the road. Also, I guess you could put stuff back there without it getting blown all over the place. This is mostly a Model T show, but there are some other cars here, like this very nice looking 1964 Falcon. The Falcon, of course, held down the lower-priced, smaller car end of the Ford lineup and competed against the likes of the Dodge Dart and Chevy Corvair. This one looks like it's been on the receiving end of a lot of love, and I really like these small Falcon-only poverty hubcaps that it's got on there. Yeah, those guys right there. It lets you see the body color on the rims, and I think really sets off the look. Moving back closer to the Model T era, we have this very nice 34 Ford Cabriolet. Now, this looks a whole lot like just an open rumble seat Roadster, but the Roadster and the Cabriolet are slightly different from one another. The Cabriolet features the styling of a convertible with closed car comfort because it's got these windows that you can roll up to be airtight. The standard Roadster does not have these, so the sides are just always open. All right, so let's go back and look at some more Model Ts. Wait a second, I spy something over there. Let's go check it out. This is, in fact, a Model N project. The Ford models N, R, and S were similar cars that were made from 1906 to 1908 and immediately preceded the Model T. The N, R, and S are interesting cars because you see a lot of features that would translate over or be refined into the later Model T. Henry Ford's idea of an inexpensive car for the masses is really starting to gel here. Notice that this car is right-hand drive. It wasn't until really the Model T era that left-hand drive became standardized in the United States, and it was really the overreaching popularity of the Model T that cemented that. I really like looking at really early things. Look at the fanciness of even just that little latch. That's why I can spend a lot of time looking at early cars, because I find even these little details very interesting. Here's a view of the other side of the engine where you can see that these cylinders are cast in pairs rather than the large monoblock of the Model T. Looks like original upholstery on the body with original horsehair sticking out there. Anyway, if not original, at least, very, very old. All right, back to Model Ts, for real this time. Here is, I believe, a 26. The 26s and 7s are very similar, but I think this is a 26 Model T touring car. The wire wheels that you see on there are a standard Ford accessory at the time. Next to it, we have an early T with what's known as a salesman's box on the back. Really nice job on the graphics on this one. It really looks great. And even from across the parking lot, I can tell that that is a moon, because it's got that, moon hood ornament. I always like moons whenever I see them, which isn't really all that often. It's kind of a rare car these days. The company was started by Joseph Moon in 1905. Oh, hey, look, there's even a Moon Club. Anyway, it lasted from 1905 to 1930. At the very end, they were making the Ruxton car in their factory. A Ruxton, if you don't remember, was the first American front-wheel drive car that was designed, although the Cord L29 actually beat them to the punch in production. Hey, I was talking about Roadster pickups. Here is a Roadster pickup with a standard Roadster right next to it, so you can see the difference between the two. Here's the standard Roadster with the Roadster trunk on the back, and next to it we have another standard Roadster where the trunk has been replaced with the pickup bed. So you can see, although these cars are different years, you can see it's the same car, just with the back changed out. There are also quite a contingent of Model A Fords here. Oh, there's a hot rod, if you're into that. The Model A, of course, came directly after the Model T, but before the Ford V8. Ford really felt that the Model A was the beginning of a new era for the company, so he started the alphabet all over again with the letter A. Well, also the alternative was to name this car the Model U, and I'm not sure if that would have really gone well. Although, when he came out with the V8, that would have been the Model V, and that actually would have worked. So even back in the Model T era, people felt the need for speed, and if you wanted some speed, first you got rid of some unnecessary weight. So you took your Model T and got rid of anything that you thought you didn't need. That's how you end up with speedsters like this. This is an era-correct modification. In fact, if you couple a build like this with some speed components, you're really ready to make the jump to hyperspace. Well, maybe not, but Model T-based race cars could be surprisingly quick for the time, in fact, competitive. Also, builds like this can be fun to build and fun to drive. While there were a few commercially built speedster bodies available at the time, most of these were home-built, so there really is no wrong way to do them. Over next to it, we have a well-accessoried 1926 touring car. You see the oil cowl lamps there. That actually was still possible to have as late as very late 1925. Get those, you would have to have opted not to purchase the starter feature, although, you know, most people did want a self-starter, but if you didn't want to spend the extra couple of bucks, you did not get a battery, so you got oil lamps. Hey, would you look at that? This is a great example of an aftermarket body showcasing the many uses for the Model T. Based on the side graphics, this was part of the Iowa Library System's book caravan that would have brought books to areas of rural Iowa that didn't have direct access to libraries. Other aftermarket accessories on this T include these double Hassler shock absorbers. Maybe to help support the load of all those books that it's carrying. Or at the very least, you know, maybe not bounce them around so much. I really like this T. I think the body is just fantastic. Plus, you can spend all this time in your car just reading. It'd just be a fun car to drive around. Oh, by the way, that says fighting illiteracy for those of you who don't know. This year's homecoming featured a special display of Model T era campers. There were a lot of ways to spend the night with your Model T, but for the first time, there were commercially available camper trailers that folded out into actually some really nice and comfortable beds. Taking a look at this first one, you can see that these sides fold out and down, and you can put a couple of mattresses in there, much more comfortable than just a tent. This next one is slightly more complex because there is a tent over the entire trailer, but you still have sort of the same theme where these sides fold out and you have mattresses to either side and can be very comfortable. Of course, there's really no need to overcomplicate things when all you need is just a trailer that you can throw a mattress in the back with a cover over it. The other thing that you can do is you don't even need the trailer. This is a sort of a roadster pickup kind of a deal. It extends out just a bit beyond what a normal roadster pickup would have, but this is the same concept as that trailer where you just have sort of a bed in the back. This one's a little bit nicer. You've got an actual door there. All right, so over here it looks like we've got just a full-on tent, but if you look, there's a trailer hitch sticking out of it. So let's walk around the other side and take a look and see what this thing is. Turns out this is really high class with a full-on awning out front. I really like the vintage Coleman camp stove and the folding wooden table out here. This is really nice. Let's take a look inside. Looking inside, we can see that this is a similar sort of a setup to the earlier trailers that we looked at, but obviously way more elaborate. The owner has obviously put a lot of work into gathering vintage camping material, and the overall effect actually is really nice. Over here we can see the vintage trunk of dishware. This is not roughing it. So I've talked before about how much the Model T has changed over the years. Let's just hone in on just one component and see how that changed over the production run. Let's look at radiators. This is a 1909. You can see the very early style Ford logo. That was changed fairly quickly. In 1910, the standard Ford logo started to appear, and there were a number of design tweaks right away, like the addition of a hole for this choke rod. That way you could pull that and choke the carburetor as you were cranking the car. There were actually a number of very early tweaks to the filler neck and interior support, but by 1911, they pretty much had the design down. This brass radiator stayed pretty static until 1916, when brass was becoming a little old-fashioned. Here you can see on this 1915 that the amount of brass on the car is starting to be dialed way back, with the most of the components are black steel with just a little bit of brass trim. This is kind of the end of the brass era. We're entering what would be called the nickel era because nickel plating was the new thing that was displacing brass. And this is just not a Model T thing. This is happening all across the automotive industry. Some companies, of course, were more fashion forward and were making this change before Ford. Industry was changing from brass radiators to nickel-plated radiators. Well, except for Ford. You can see here that they just went with black paint. Decisions like this are why the Model T was much less expensive than other cars. This is part of the secret sauce that gave Ford a 50% worldwide market share by 1923. Decisions like this are how Ford put car ownership within reach of the average person. I do want to point out that this shroud is just a radiator cover. Over next to it, we have a Model T that doesn't have the shroud. That's what the radiator actually looks like without that metal covering over it. The radiator changed again in 1923. They enlarged the engine compartment slightly to give it a little bit more modern design. The radiator increased in size by 1 3/8. Here I was just comparing the high versus low radiator. Sometimes you can see it with the naked eye, but it's subtle. Also in 1923, you can see some of the Ford advertising is starting to market directly to women and wives. The success of the Ford Motor Company and this basic design has given birth to the concept of the two-car household. Anyway, the new larger engine compartment has a new larger radiator. The hood is different, the cowl is different. These parts are not interchangeable with the earlier cars. Time continues to move forward, though, and in 1925 there was another change, a little nod to style. Finally, a nickel-plated radiator was offered as an option, and in 1927 it became standard. There was also an internal engine change that forced a change to the radiator. Let me just touch on that really quick. Cars up to this point have had the fan mounted on this little arm that comes up from the front plate. I know it's kind of hard to see, but let me show you the one that came later. Starting in 1926, the fan was mounted off of the water outlet arm. You can see that that's a different mounting than before. This forced the fan blades a little bit closer to the front of the car, and the radiator had to get thinner to accommodate for that. You can see on the engine bay here a number of changes that were incorporated into the 1926-27, what was called the improved Ford. The updraft carburetor, the coil box under the hood, the gas tank has moved up to the cowl, and of course the entire body has been redesigned to look more modern. All these design changes couldn't really hide the fact that the Model T was well past its prime at this point, and the Model A needed to come. Share with you the resources that I use for tracking the year-to-year changes on the Model T. There's a great book, Model T Ford, The Car That Changed the World by Bruce McCallie, who's a man who put a lot of research into these cars. This book is actually out of print now, but you can find it used at the usual places. Also an extremely detailed online resource at the Model T Ford Club of America website. That's mtfca.com. If you go to resources and then the pull down tab and click encyclopedia, there you find a couple of different ways to look up some really detailed information, although it doesn't have a lot of pictures like the book does, and sometimes it's just nice to hold the physical book in your hand. So anyway, a couple of really great resources. And there are, of course, others, but hopefully that's of some help to somebody out there trying to work on their car. Hey, there was a Model T Ford assembly team at the show. They assemble a Model T and drive it away in under 3 minutes. There was one part actually that really impressed me. Here they are taking the rear end and they just connect it right up to the back of the engine. I do not know how they get that U-joint to just line up. Seems like every time I've had to do that, I've got to fiddle around with it forever. There's a special tool that helps, but I'm not going to spend money on that. Hey, another successful Model T assembly. Let's go and take a look at the swap meet, and off she goes. The swap meet is a great place to shop for Model T parts. It's entirely a Model T swap meet. Oh, I do need to mention, earlier I mentioned the Model T Ford Club of America. I also have to say that there's another very fine club, the Model T Ford Club International. Both are very nice clubs. In fact, the Model T Ford Club International publishes a judging guidelines that's also a very great resource at looking at year-to-year changes on the Model T. So once again, Model T Ford Club of America and Model T Ford Club International. Heck, there's no rule that says you can't join them both. If you're coming to the homecoming, the swap meet starts at 8 o'clock and goes till about 2 o'clock. Let's go take a look at that car that just drove past. This is actually for sale. This could have been yours for $12,000. This is actually the perfect tee for the fisherman in your life. You've got everything you need to catch and sell fish. We've even got some oars here for backup in case the engine dies. Of course, the giant spear gun mounted on there. Some great details here. The kerosene lamp reservoirs are actually sardine cans under there. Underneath the running boards, we've got float-of-liver pontoons. I'm a little skeptical. On the other hand, the Ford is a fairly lightweight car. Maybe add a couple of pool noodles and you should be good to go. Anyway, great execution here. I'm sure that this car is going to draw a lot of attention down at the ramp or at the boat shows. A great car for those quick runs to pick up some things at the marina. If that's a little too pricey for you, I've got this one right here at only $2,500. This is an enclosed ton truck cab mounted on a regular car chassis. You can see the regular car differential under there. Also, the regular car frame is a little bit shorter. This is a great opportunity to start your own project. It's a great place to buy it too, because you can immediately start buying parts. Here's some very nice coil boxes. I really like these aftermarket shock absorbers. Here's a nice table of some Model T jewelry with some possibly rebuilt carburetors. Here is a nice complete overhead valve system. It even includes the push rods. You can pick up some brand new transmission drums in case one of yours is cracked or maybe groovy. Here's some World War II era imitation maple flavoring tablets. Yeah. I'm going to kind of wrap up my swap meet coverage with that thought. Maybe I should buy one.
Well, that was just a few of the cars that were here at the Model T Ford Homecoming in Richmond, Indiana. If you haven't been, maybe you can plan on attending next year. It's the first week in June generally. Also, if you're in the Richmond area, remember that the Model T Ford Museum is always here and open and well worth the stop. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. There's a link right about here where you can subscribe to the channel. Or if you like this video, you can check out some of my other ones. There's some good ones back there. There's a link right about there so that you can go and check some of those out. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.